So today I thought I would actually do a little voiceover of me making this scene. This is an image that I've had in my brain for a while now of two Poui trees on a hill with their flowers blowing in the wind like sakura petals. But I figured I would kind of explain this process because I do a bunch of things in this particular project that is a combination of a bunch of tutorials that I've been looking at and trying to put them together in one scene. Like, I used the grease pencil there to sketch out the idea, and then I'm using here sculpting to make the mountains. I'm just really trying to play around with all the different things that I kind of know how to do. So I was trying the remesh modifier and Dino Topo, which I still really don't know how to use because I had the polygon for these really heavy for a lot of the project, which I eventually redid them later on. I tried a sapling add-on that I'd seen someone put in once in a video. It has a lot of stuff in that add-on where you could just generate a tree of different sizes and branches and stuff. You could even throw in leaves, but I decided to make the leaves separate because it didn't look exactly how I wanted later on. This was a trick I saw somewhere too, where you take a circle and you make a star out of it because it has, you could just pull in the vertices. Really cool idea. Once I blocked out the scene, I went into Critter just to play around with the colors that I wanted to use. I knew they had to be pink and yellow because those are the two different colors of Poui trees, and then I knew grass was green. And I just tried to figure out colors with that. I skipped through this process because it was really just me playing around a little bit. And you can bring that straight into Blender. If you bring it in shadeless, apparently the light doesn't interact with the actual object as much, which is really cool. Here is where I start landscaping. I went over and made these little blades of grass many times. I've cut most of that out, but that's because I wanted to try geometry nodes, which is a way to, well, it's very complex. It involves a lot of math, but I just use what I remember for shoresies, which is you instance grass blades on a plane, and then you just play around with the settings a bit. I did this a few times. And if you join the geometry of the plane, then you get both the plane and the things that you're generating or instancing onto the plane. So you get grass on a plane of grass. Then I threw in some colors. I started trying to just block out the colors so I can see what the scene started to look like, pulling from the image that I brought in. Very basic shaders, and I completely forgot about getting rid of the roughness so that it wouldn't be so shiny. This is another thing that I'd seen where to make like cell shading look, you can just use constant in a color ramp, and it will make it not gradient but like sharp chops into different colors. And yeah, I really I really liked how simple that was to just do to make it look. See, look how pretty that is. And so I just threw that same shader on a bunch of things and changed the colors for it. It's still not as soft as I get it to here, but that took a little bit of playing around. But I really liked how the light of the sun interacted with how soft the colors were looking here. And so I threw that on the mountains too, so it got really nice and like, graphic or cartoony. I like that a lot more than trying to make those colors look realistic. It was a lot more fun to see it. Like when I'm sculpting here, just moving the colors around because you're moving the faces around. And I thought that was pretty nice. But real objects, like the objects affect one another, so I had to move the sky back, for example. I had some bricks in this scene, like I was thinking like stone steps. And so I was trying to model it here, but it got very heavy and crashed the whole file later on, so I removed them eventually, but I had them in here as a thought and then promptly forgot about having them again. So here's the thing, you can weight paint with geometry nodes. So if you have a vector group of all the vertices and stuff where I created there. The problem was I don't know if something I did or whatever, but I couldn't choose it again. So I had to redo the whole geometry node tree. I'm sure there's a better way to do that. So I just redid the whole thing here and I could finally choose the vertex group. Which allowed me to paint directly onto the plane, and that would tell Blender put the instances of blades of grass in the spots that are red. That's basically what you're doing. This is such a cool, interesting thing that I've seen used in different ways where you're just painting on stuff. It gets pretty heavy, I think, but it's still pretty cool to just paint on grass. I think that's fascinating. So I did the same thing again later on to do the trees. Looking up some Poui references to kind of get an idea of how to do trees again. What do branches look like? What do leaves look like? You know? And you can see that I attempted to make individual leaves. That would have been too heavy. So what I did instead was distribute directly onto the branches of the sapling tree. Originally that's a curve, and then I had to convert it into a mesh. But since the singular leaves didn't work, I said, alright, why don't I just look up a branch and I'll just paint a PNG of a branch. It's probably not going to be seen that well. And, you know, just draw a stick, throw on some leaves so that it gives you a little bulk, and then just distribute that onto the branches, which worked out pretty well, I think, because then I was able to really animate it later. So once I did that, I was able to bring it in as a transparent PNG, could bring it in as a plane, and then I just distributed the plane onto those branches, onto the individual points of the tree. And I used a weight painting group here as well so that it wouldn't also just stick itself onto the trunk like it's doing here. I removed that, so by using the same trick that I did with grass. Here's the thing, I think you can use geometry nodes, like the same group, and you just replace the stuff each time. I'm not sure how to do it, but I'm learning, so I just redid it over and over, and which is good practice anyway, so that I can remember how to do it. I have gotten really accustomed to now distributing points on faces. Let's just say that. Baby steps. And then I threw like rotate onto it and put a random value so that it will rotate in different directions and make the tree look full. Duplicated that, made it a separate group so I can use different colors on it. So I can have a yellow tree and a pink tree. And boom, we got a scene. It's starting to look like something. So to make the yellow and the pink Poui is different. I made 2 different PNG layers. One with a bunch of yellow flowers, and then I just basically filled that with pink. And then I made individual Poui flowers, like a big pink one and a big yellow one. That way I didn't really know what I was going to do with it, but I had a vague idea that I probably should have individual flowers. So once I brought those into Blender, then I could distribute those same branches, those flowers onto the branches, like just overlay them. Branches, flowers, full tree. Then I just figured I would put a little shader on the actual flowers, and then I did the part that I was really trying to get to, which is distribute a bunch of points on a plane and make flowers float through the air like cherry blossoms, which is what I really wanted to make this whole scene for. So you just distribute a collection of the pink flowers and the yellow flowers, do the exact same thing that I was doing before, randomize the scale, randomize the rotation. The trick to animating it is to use a value and moving the frame. I don't exactly know what it's doing, but I know it's a driver. Basically just animated the wind, I call it a cloud, so like a cloud of flowers just moving across, and that then I just put in a value node and hashtag frame/tau, which I'd learned tau is like cycling through pi, I think. I'm not quite 100% sure, I'm not very good at math, but I saw it somewhere that it rotated 360 degrees. So, and the driver, by putting the hash, it makes it a variable, so it will move it forward by each frame. I know there's a way in the new version of Blender that you can use a different node to do just that, but it's pretty cool using it by that driver thing as well. Here I just wanted to make the flowers glow all of a sudden because, I don't know, it's supposed to be a dream sequence, so it should glow. They should look pretty and like glowy. Glowing stuff always makes things look like not real, so why not? And I threw that on every single flower. I think I even threw it on green branches as well. Then I figured I would animate the stars a little bit. So I just moved the star up and down, gave it a little rotation. Sort of like, you know, those stars in Mario Galaxy. And you just have them floating somewhere. So the trick with this is you go into Graph Editor and you go to the rotation and you just stick on a modifier that makes it cycle through a set of the same keyframes forever. So it will just literally just go through those same 3 frames, but you wouldn't have to put the keyframes in yourself, which is really helpful. It just automates this. And you do that with the Z location as well, so it'll move up and down and it'll just bounce forever, basically. Then I attached a little point light to it so that it would move around in the scene. And I animated the sun moving. This was by accident. I just wanted to move the sun by angle, but I was like, wait, I could animate it. I can literally just stick a keyframe, stick it to another keyframe, and it'll look like daylight is happening. Like it's moving from night to morning, or going backwards in time to sunset. That's simple way of moving sunlight in a scene, and oh, it's really starting to look kind of magical now. And then I just animated, played around with those things, and I decided, hey, I have one star in the scene, I should make more. So I made another cloud of stars in the background here. Same thing as the cloud of flowers, except I didn't move these, I just made literally a plane, distributed some points, and then made a very simple shape, a pentagon, made that glow, and stuck them on this plane in the background. Just had to change the scale, make sure the rotation and scale were reset so that everything would be 1:1 and wouldn't be weird. Put an emission on that, and boom, glowing stars. Like, it's once you get the hang of it, it's really simple to just build up the scene. It's a really interesting way to make art by moving a bunch of noodles around, but very helpful. And of course, you can't have Poui trees without Poui flowers on the floor and the grass underneath it. So figured I'd throw those in as well, using the same flowers I used for the clouds. A little animation and moving into the scene with the camera, and boom, look at that magic. I rendered it out. This took a few tries, getting the rendering to work nicely, because the thing about geometry nodes is, although you can build up a scene pretty quickly, it's because you're calculating so many instances of things, I think that it drags your rendering time down, because rendering, like everything else in the scene, see how quickly it moves, but as soon as you throw in that plane of grass, oh, it just dragged everything down. Now here's a cool trick to animate the grass to look like it's wind. You put a position node, and I think what it's doing here is it takes a noise texture, which is basically a randomized plane of colors from black to white, and it's moving that plane across by the position. When you take the position, you add it, and you add this frame here, that driver. It's literally moving that plane of black and white across. You're not seeing it, but that's what it's doing. And once you do that by half, it moves the objects across. It rotates the objects. I have it into the rotation, but so it's moving these variables across a plane. I don't know how to explain this, so I need to figure out exactly what it's doing, but I think that's what it's doing. So I actually changed it from X rotation to Y rotation, and it works so well. I did it for the tree branches as well, so they both move in at the same time as the grass, the trees, the flowers. It would look like wind is blowing just by throwing those 4 nodes together, which is crazy. You can see how if I move the X here, it moves across, and then if I move the Y, it moves across. So if you do it at the same time, boom, branches are moving in the wind. You lower the scale of the noise texture and it slows it down. I just think that's really cool. That's just an interesting little trick. And I basically did for just the trees and the grass and the Poui flowers on the floor. Left the planes of the clouds and the flowers as is. Then it was time to render everything. Basically, you want to render out the scene in layers in a bunch of images in PNGs. That way you can composite it later. So I render this out. I render out all the layers, the mountains, the sky, and the clouds in the background. Then the plains, the trees, and then the foreground flowers. And you bring it into the compositing workspace. I just created a new file so that it wouldn't be so slow. And once you do that, you use the alpha over node to combine and layer the scene together. But I didn't actually check transparency in the film box in the screen settings, in the render settings. So everything didn't render out with transparency, so I had to re-render everything. See, I got it in the end. And then you literally just play around. I am not a good compositor by I don't think I know how to color grade or anything like that. I just went with my gut. Through a blur, you could actually animate the blur on, so I tried animating the blur on the foreground flowers to kind of get a sense of depth of fields going. You can do that in Blender, like by itself, it would do that for you. I just completely forgot to do it, and so I did it in post here. And then you just could, you know, mix up the curves and you get a full scene. Isn't that crazy? So thank you if you watched all of my rambling of how I went through this process. Mainly, I just wanted to record my learning process so I can come back to this afterwards if I forget something. And maybe this might help somebody else see that it's okay to make a bunch of total mistakes while you're learning. That's the point of the process. So yeah, thank you for watching.